Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I always prided myself on being a dedicated husband and father, a man who balanced the demands of a high-powered legal career with the responsibilities of family life. Yet lately, the veneer of our seemingly perfect existence had begun to crack, revealing subtle, painful wounds inflicted by the one person I trusted most, Lauren. It started with the smallest of remarks at our monthly family brunches at the country club, where Lauren would casually dismiss my contributions with a well-timed laugh or a pointed comment. One crisp Sunday morning, as I recounted a challenging case from the previous week, she interrupted with a laugh that carried no warmth. "Oh, Brian, must be exhausting being all work and no play," she said in front of our relatives, her tone light yet laced with derision. I felt the sting of her words like a jolt of bitter electricity. Internally, I questioned every sacrifice I'd made. Long hours at the office, missed recitals, and quiet evenings spent worrying about the future, all undermined by her effortless ability to turn my commitment into a punchline. Later that day, as I was tidying up after our children's playdate, I caught myself replaying her comment over and over in my mind. "Is this how you really feel about my dedication?" I wondered silently, the question gnawing at me with a mix of confusion and hurt. That evening, during a dinner party with some of our closest friends, the tension reached a fever pitch. We gathered in a softly lit dining room at an upscale restaurant, where Lauren, ever the center of attention, orchestrated the conversation with a practiced ease. Midway through dessert, she leaned toward a small group and remarked with a playful yet sharp edge, "I must admit, I often wonder how a brilliant attorney like Brian manages to keep his mind on law when he spends so much time at home." Her words, though veiled as a joke, sent an icy silence rippling through the table. I could see the confusion on the faces of our guests, some awkwardly shifting in their seats, others exchanging uncertain glances. I felt exposed, as if every flaw I had ever tried to hide was suddenly illuminated by her calculated sarcasm. For a moment, the room seemed to close in on me, each whisper and glance amplifying my internal turmoil. I clutched my fork so tightly that it trembled in my hand, and a barrage of thoughts flooded my mind. Was I simply overreacting, or was this part of a deliberate pattern to belittle me in front of everyone I cared about? As the evening wore on, my inner monologue churned relentlessly. I recalled the countless times I had supported her ambitions, the way I quietly celebrated her successes, even as she casually undermined my worth. "I'm a partner, not a prop," I thought bitterly. I struggled to decide if I should confront her on the spot or remain silent for the sake of appearances. The voices of our friends, unaware of the underlying hurt, mingled with the soft strains of background music, further complicating my resolve. When I finally excused myself to the restroom, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. A man whose eyes were red-rimmed, not just from exhaustion, but from the weight of ongoing humiliation. That night, lying awake in bed while the house fell into a heavy silence, I vowed to myself that I would not let this erosion of my dignity continue unchecked. The painful realization that the wounds she inflicted were not accidental but calculated, slowly pushing me into a corner of despair and isolation, became an unbearable burden. My heart ached with the silent question. How much longer would I allow her to chip away at the man I had worked so hard to become? The suspense of that uncertainty gnawed at me, leaving me teetering on the brink of a decision that could alter our lives forever. That evening, the air in the lavish dining room felt thick with tension as I sat among our closest friends at another one of Lauren's carefully orchestrated gatherings. I had barely recovered from the sting of our last encounter when she launched into another round of jibes, this time in front of a group of people I considered friends and colleagues. The chatter and clinking of glasses did little to mask the sting of her words. Midway through dinner, she leaned over to a friend and quipped, "You know, Brian's so dedicated to his cases that he forgets how to enjoy life. It must be lonely being so serious all the time." Her tone was light, almost playful, but the effect was anything but. I felt my heart clench as murmurs of laughter spread around the table. The laughter was not for my benefit. It was for her amusement at my expense. I clenched my fists under the table, the careful veneer of composure cracking with every sarcastic remark. I had long tolerated her subtle degradations, attributing them to her sense of humor, but tonight was different. The sting of humiliation ignited a simmering anger I could no longer contain. I had sacrificed so much for her, late nights poring over case files, missing family moments, all while she reveled in her role as the charming socialite. My inner voice screamed, "Enough is enough," as I sat there silently enduring her latest quip. As the evening progressed, her jokes became bolder, and I felt each one cut deeper. I listened as she recounted an anecdote about a time I had been too absorbed in work to attend one of her charity events, framing it as an amusing tale of absent-minded dedication. Every word felt like a carefully aimed dart, striking at my core, and I found myself teetering on the edge of a breaking point. Finally, as the dessert course was served and the laughter around me reached its peak, I could stand it no longer. I excused myself abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the polished floor, and made my way to the quiet corner of the room. In that fleeting moment of solitude, my thoughts roiled. I could no longer ignore the cumulative pain of years spent being reduced to a punchline, my contributions dismissed as trivial. The weight of each humiliation pressed upon me until I could bear it no longer. Steeling myself, I returned to the table, every step measured and determined. I stood before her, my voice trembling with both fury and resolve as I addressed the room. "Lauren," I said, my tone cold and unwavering, "I have endured your jokes, your derision, and the constant belittlement of who I am. I have supported you, celebrated your triumphs, and sacrificed my own happiness, only to be reduced to a source of amusement." For a long, heart-stopping moment, the room fell silent, the soft hum of background music and idle chatter ceasing as every eye turned to me. A friend whispered, "Is he serious?" while others looked on in stunned disbelief. Lauren's eyes widened in shock, her confident smile faltering. "Brian, this isn't the time or place," she began, her words faltering under the weight of the charged silence. "No, it is exactly the time and the place," I replied firmly, my voice echoing my determination. "I refuse to let my sacrifices be twisted into entertainment. I'm not your prop, nor am I the butt of your jokes. I am a man with dignity, and tonight I reclaim it." My words, spoken with a clarity that resonated in every corner of the room, left an indelible mark on everyone present. In that powerful moment, I felt both liberated and exposed, aware that I had shattered the carefully maintained illusion of our perfect life. As the stunned silence gave way to murmurs and hushed conversations, I realized that my breaking point had arrived. The realization that my life, filled with quiet sacrifice, had been nothing more than a punchline in her eyes, set the stage for a reckoning I could no longer postpone. With every ounce of courage I could muster, I returned to my seat, the weight of my words lingering in the charged atmosphere, and silently resolved that this confrontation would mark the beginning of an irreversible change. A few days after that tense evening, I found myself moving through our house with a heavy heart and a desperate need for answers. I had barely slept, haunted by the echo of Lauren's cruel words and the hollow promises that had once defined our life together. One rainy afternoon, as I organized the cluttered shelves in our study, a space filled with mementos of happier times, I accidentally brushed against a loose panel behind a stack of old legal journals. The panel shifted slightly, revealing a hidden compartment. My curiosity got the better of me, and I reached in, my fingers trembling as they brushed against something cold and smooth. To my shock, I extracted a small, intricately carved wooden box. It felt out of place amidst the legal briefs and family photographs, and a sinking feeling began to spread through my chest. With a sense of foreboding, I carefully opened the box, only to find inside an expensive silver cufflink set and a delicate watch, its face glimmering in the dim light. The inscriptions on the watch were unmistakably meant for another man, a man whose initials were not mine. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to comprehend the significance of this hidden treasure. The discovery hit me like a tidal wave of betrayal, washing away any remnants of the trust one once had. I stared at the items for long, silent minutes, each second dragging on as I pieced together the implications of what lay before me. The cufflinks and watch were not only valuable, but also carried an unmistakable air of intimacy, an unspoken message that Lauren's affections were not reserved for me alone. The realization that my wife had orchestrated this intricate deception left me reeling with a mixture of anger, disbelief, and heartache. I recalled the subtle hints I had dismissed over time. The new expensive tennis outfits she suddenly wore, her insistence on taking training sessions that never seemed to improve her game, and the way she had always been overly secretive about her weekly visits to the country club. Now, the evidence was tangible, a silent testament to a betrayal far deeper than mere emotional neglect. As I clutched the box in my hands, memories of every slight and every joke at my expense flashed before my eyes, each one now imbued with a new, painful meaning. "How long have you been lying to me?" I whispered into the empty room, the words echoing with raw anguish. The room around me, filled with reminders of the life we once built together, suddenly felt like a stage set for a tragedy I could no longer ignore. Determination began to replace my initial shock, and I realized that this revelation was not a moment for impulsive anger, but for a calculated pursuit of the truth. I decided then that I would gather every piece of evidence necessary to confront the full scope of her deception. My mind raced with plans, tracking her movements, reviewing phone records, and even considering hiring a professional to discreetly document her activities. Every step of the way, I reminded myself that this was not about vengeance, but about reclaiming my dignity and uncovering the reality that had been hidden beneath layers of lies. As the rain tapped softly against the window, I wrapped the box carefully in a cloth and hid it in a drawer, a secret weapon I would use when the time was right. In that quiet, somber moment, I vowed to no longer let her manipulation define me. Instead, I would meticulously collect proof, ensuring that when the day came, there would be no doubt about the extent of her betrayal. The journey ahead promised to be fraught with painful discoveries and difficult confrontations, yet I could already sense the shift within me. A transformation from a man who silently suffered to one who was determined to expose the truth. And so, with a heavy heart and a resolute spirit, I stepped away from that study, my mind already churning with plans for the inevitable reckoning that would follow. In the days that followed the discovery of the hidden box, I realized that I could no longer remain a silent victim of Lauren's calculated deceit. The shock of finding the cufflinks and watch had ignited within me a transformation, a decision to reclaim my dignity by meticulously planning a reckoning that would expose the truth behind her carefully constructed lies. Every morning, before the city fully awoke, I would rise with a heavy determination, my mind buzzing with plans and contingencies. I began by researching every detail about the items I had discovered, their unique engravings, the particular style of craftsmanship, and even the subtle nuances in design that hinted at an exclusivity meant for someone else. I spent hours online, reading reviews and visiting forums about high-end accessories, ensuring that I could forge a near-perfect replica if needed. My next step was even more deliberate. I knew that Lauren prided herself on her impeccable taste and the flawless image she maintained at the country club. So, I decided to replace the original items with an indistinguishable counterfeit that would remain unnoticed by her keen eye. I visited a discreet jeweler under the guise of purchasing a gift for a friend, asking probing questions about custom orders and replication techniques. The jeweler's expertise confirmed that such a replica was possible, and with every detail noted, I placed an order, one that would later serve as a silent testament to her betrayal. At the same time, I knew I needed to gather concrete evidence of her continuing deception. I began discreetly tracking her movements, not with overt surveillance, but by installing a tiny GPS tracker on her car during one of her routine visits to the country club. The process was nerve-wracking. I recalled every moment of humiliation from our public gatherings as I carefully attached the device, making sure it was hidden from view. Late that night, in the dim glow of my study lamp, I watched as the tracker's data began to stream onto my computer screen, a digital trail that painted a vivid picture of her secret meetings. Each coordinate led me closer to the hidden corners of her double life, fueling a mix of anger and cautious hope. I even consulted a trusted friend, a quiet observer of our social circle, whose subtle nods of agreement confirmed what I suspected all along. "Brian, sometimes the truth is buried in the details," he remarked one evening over a cup of strong coffee. "I'm starting to see that now," I replied, my voice low and resolute. "Every minute, every step she takes, tells a story of deception I can no longer ignore." My plan evolved with every passing day. I created a secure digital archive where I meticulously stored every piece of data from the tracker, every receipt from the jeweler, and even screenshots of her social media posts that hinted at her secret rendezvous with her tennis coach. I started drafting a timeline that linked every suspicious detail together, a web of evidence that would eventually leave no room for doubt. Each new piece of information was like a piece of a puzzle snapping into place, confirming that Lauren's weekly training sessions were nothing more than an elaborate cover for her affair. I found myself wrestling with a mix of emotions. There was a part of me that longed to confront her immediately, to shout out my pain and disappointment. But another part, one that was steadily growing stronger, reminded me that patience was my greatest ally. In the quiet moments before dawn, as I sipped black coffee and stared at the city skyline, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my decision. I was no longer the man who silently endured humiliation and emotional neglect. I was becoming someone who would stand up and force the truth into the light, no matter how painful it might be. And so, with every plan laid out and every piece of evidence carefully secured, I felt a sense of empowerment replacing the long-held bitterness. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty and the possibility of more heartache. But I knew that this meticulous planning was the only way to ensure that Lauren's deceit would no longer define our lives. With the replicas safely ordered and the digital trail growing stronger by the day, I took a deep breath, resolved to let justice find its way, even if it meant dismantling the carefully curated facade of our once idyllic world. The evening was crisp and filled with an uneasy anticipation as I parked my car a discreet distance from the upscale restaurant. The neon lights of the city blurred into a comforting haze, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I had been tracking Lauren's every move for weeks, and tonight, the GPS data confirmed her presence at this elegant venue. As I stepped into the restaurant, the polished decor and soft murmur of conversations made it clear that this was a world where appearances mattered above all. I scanned the room, my eyes quickly landing on a secluded table in a quiet corner. There, under the gentle glow of a chandelier, sat Lauren with a man whose presence exuded a casual charm, a man who was unmistakably her tennis coach. The sight of them together, laughing softly and sharing small, intimate gestures, ignited a storm of conflicting emotions within me. I watched as Lauren accepted a carefully wrapped gift from him, her fingers brushing his with an ease that belied the secret they shared. Every smile, every subtle look they exchanged confirmed the betrayal that had been festering in the silence of our home. With a deep, steadying breath, I walked toward their table, each step measured and deliberate. The soft clink of cutlery and quiet hum of conversation seemed to fade into the background as I approached, my presence disrupting the carefully curated atmosphere of their private world. I slid into the chair opposite Lauren, the shock of my sudden appearance freezing the moment into an eternity. For a heartbeat, time slowed as both she and her companion stared at me, their expressions a tangled mix of surprise and apprehension. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight," Lauren managed to say, her voice trembling slightly as she searched my face for a sign of what was to come. I met her gaze with a calm that belied the storm raging within. "I was hoping to catch you before the truth slipped further away," I replied evenly, each word slicing through the charged silence. Her companion shifted in his seat, his eyes darting between us as he tried to understand the gravity of the situation. "What truth?" he asked, his tone a mixture of confusion and apprehension. I leaned forward, my voice firm, yet laced with the pain of years spent in silence. "The truth that your so-called training sessions were nothing more than a cover for secret meetings, that the expensive tennis outfits and late-night excuses were part of a facade. I have every piece of evidence, tracker logs, receipts, even the counterfeit I replaced your gift with, to prove that the life you led with deception is over." Lauren's eyes widened, and for a brief moment, I saw panic flicker in their depths, a realization that the carefully constructed world she had maintained was crumbling. "Brian, you don't understand," she stammered, her voice losing strength under the weight of my unwavering gaze. "Understand? I have spent nights piecing together every lie, every excuse, until the mosaic of your betrayal was undeniable," I said, my words measured and resolute. "Tonight, in front of these people, I expose the truth that you've hidden so well behind your rehearsed smiles and false pretenses." A heavy silence settled over the table, punctuated only by the distant clatter of silverware and murmurs of the restaurant's patrons who had begun to take notice. Lauren's companion tried to interject, but I raised my hand, silencing him with the intensity of my gaze. "This isn't about anger anymore. It's about reclaiming my dignity and forcing you to face the consequences of your actions," I continued, my voice growing colder with each passing moment. For a long, excruciating moment, Lauren searched for words, her eyes pleading for a reprieve that would never come. "Please, Brian, let's talk about this privately," she whispered, but I shook my head slowly. "There's nothing left to talk about, Lauren. The evidence speaks for itself." With that, I stood up from the table, leaving behind an atmosphere thick with stunned silence and unspoken regret. As I walked out into the cool night air, a mix of victory and deep sorrow washed over me. I had finally confronted the deceit, and though the immediate pain was raw and unfiltered, a small ember of liberation glowed within me, a promise that I could rebuild from the ruins of betrayal. After that fateful night at the restaurant, I returned home feeling numb and disoriented, as if every step I took was weighted by the echoes of shattered trust. The drive back was a blur, a mixture of disbelief and a deep-seated sorrow that gnawed at my resolve. When I finally unlocked the door, the familiar setting of our home felt alien and oppressive, every shadow in the hallway a reminder of the secrets that had been unveiled. I dropped my bag in the entryway and sank into the worn armchair in the living room, trying desperately to piece together my thoughts. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating, when suddenly the sound of hurried footsteps on the stairs interrupted my solitude. I knew it was her before I saw her. Lauren appeared in the doorway, her face a volatile mix of fury and desperation, as if she were clinging to the remnants of a facade she had long maintained. "Brian, what did you do?" she demanded, her voice trembling between anger and panic. I met her gaze steadily, the calm resolve I had forged in the restaurant, now hardening into an unyielding determination. "I exposed the truth, Lauren," I replied, my tone even but laced with the pain of every betrayal. "I couldn't let you continue living a lie." Her eyes flashed with indignation as she stepped closer, her hands gesturing wildly as if to reclaim control of the situation. "You embarrassed me. You made me look like a fool in front of everyone," she argued, her words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "Everything I did was for us, for our image, for our future." I shook my head slowly, the weight of her empty justification bearing down on me. "For us?" I echoed bitterly. "All your so-called efforts have been nothing but a cover for your infidelity. Every expensive outfit, every excuse about training for tournaments, they were lies to hide your true intentions." Lauren's face contorted, her features twisting between disbelief and hurt as she tried to deflect my accusations with feigned concern. "You're overreacting, Brian. You have no idea what it takes to balance everything," she pleaded, her voice softening momentarily as if seeking a shred of the old warmth between us. But I could see through the veneer. "No, I see exactly what you've been doing," I said firmly. "I've gathered every piece of evidence, every secret rendezvous, every excuse that never added up. I'm not the one who's been playing a part here. I was the one left in the dark while you built your own world of deceit." A heavy silence fell between us, punctuated only by the distant hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic tick of the wall clock. Lauren's eyes, once vibrant with carefully curated charm, now shimmered with unshed tears of frustration and anger. "You think leaving is the answer?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "We can fix this if you just stay. We can work through it together." I took a steadying breath, feeling the surge of clarity that had slowly overtaken me over these past weeks. "I've tried to fix us, Lauren, but I can't keep mending the pieces of my broken self while you continue to deny the truth," I replied softly, yet resolutely. "I deserve to live a life free from manipulation and deceit. I won't be your scapegoat any longer." Her pleading gaze faltered as I rose from the chair, the finality of my decision clear in every measured step I took toward the door. "Please, Brian," she called after me, her voice a mix of desperation and regret. But I didn't stop. With one last look over my shoulder, a mixture of sorrow and liberation, I stepped out into the cool night, leaving behind the home that had once been a sanctuary. That door closing behind me symbolized more than just an exit from a building. It marked my first real step toward reclaiming my dignity and freedom. After leaving the home, I found myself in a legal maze I never thought I'd have to navigate, yet I was determined to reclaim my dignity and ensure that Lauren's deception would not go unpunished. I began by researching divorce attorneys, and when I finally met with a seasoned lawyer known for his uncompromising stance on infidelity cases, I knew I had found the ally I needed. I sat across from him in his tastefully appointed office, the polished wood and rows of legal volumes lending an air of solemn authority to the room. He listened intently as I recounted every painful detail: the public humiliations, the discovery of the hidden box, the covert surveillance, and even the confrontation at the restaurant. My voice wavered as I explained how every piece of evidence, from GPS data to meticulously archived receipts, had painted a clear picture of a carefully orchestrated betrayal. "Your evidence is compelling, Brian," he said firmly, his gaze steady. "This isn't just a case of emotional neglect. It's clear that Lauren orchestrated a systematic deception." His words, delivered with clinical precision, stirred a mix of relief and sorrow within me. I recalled the long nights spent piecing together the puzzle of her infidelity, the bitter taste of humiliation, and the heavy burden of carrying the truth alone. Over the next few weeks, I prepared for the inevitable legal battle. I gathered every digital file and every piece of documentation that corroborated my account, organizing them into a detailed timeline of events. I revisited the painful memories and reread the notes I had scribbled during moments of anguish, each one now serving as undeniable testimony to her unfaithfulness. Court sessions loomed on the horizon, each one promising to reopen wounds I had fought so hard to keep hidden, yet I remained resolute in my pursuit of justice. I attended preliminary hearings where the opposing counsel tried to portray me as nothing more than a disgruntled husband on a vengeful crusade. At one such session, the opposing lawyer sneered, "It seems you're more interested in revenge than in reaching a fair resolution." I met his accusation with calm resolve, replying, "My only interest is in the truth. The evidence speaks for itself, and justice will prevail." In the courtroom, every word was scrutinized, every gesture analyzed, and I could see the shift in the judge's demeanor as I laid out the timeline of Lauren's lies, each detail meticulously verified by my lawyer. The mounting pressure of the legal battle was intense, but with every session, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. I no longer viewed the process as a punishment, but as a necessary step to reclaim my life and rebuild my shattered self-esteem. In quiet moments outside the courtroom, I reflected on the transformation I had undergone, from a man crushed by humiliation to one who now stood firm, bolstered by the support of a just legal system and a newfound inner strength. Each document I reviewed, every piece of evidence I submitted, felt like reclaiming a part of myself that had long been overshadowed by deceit. As the legal proceedings progressed, I sensed that the balance was slowly tipping in my favor, and the realization that my painful journey was steering me toward a future defined by truth and integrity filled me with cautious hope. After the legal proceedings were behind me, I stepped into a new chapter with cautious optimism and a determination to rebuild everything I once thought was lost. I moved into a modest apartment in a quieter part of town, a space that, while small, was entirely mine. Each morning, I woke to a fresh start and a city humming with possibility. I dusted off old ambitions, revisited contacts in my field, and slowly rekindled a career that had taken a back seat during the turmoil. At first, it felt like stepping onto a stage after years in the wings, uncertain but filled with the thrill of rediscovery. I began taking on smaller cases that gradually reminded me of why I had loved the law in the first place, a passion I had nearly forgotten under the weight of personal betrayal. Evenings turned into cherished moments with my children, whose bright laughter and uncomplicated joy provided the perfect counterpoint to the darkness of the past. We cooked dinner together, played games in the living room, and took long walks in the park, with a crisp air and rustling leaves served as a gentle reminder that nature, like life, always moves forward. One evening, as we sat around a worn dining table sharing stories about our day, my youngest looked up and said, "You're smiling a lot more now, Dad." I paused, surprised at the simplicity and honesty of the observation. "I am, kiddo," I replied, feeling warmth spread through me. "I'm starting to find my own way again." That small moment of connection fueled my resolve to embrace this fresh start. I enrolled in a community class to refine my skills and even started volunteering at a local legal aid center, where helping others reminded me that my journey was about more than just personal vindication. It was about rebuilding trust in a system that valued truth. Slowly, the image of the man I had been, broken by humiliation and betrayal, was replaced by a new vision, one of strength, resilience, and hope. I decorated my apartment with little touches that reminded me of my identity, from framed photos of happier days to inspirational quotes on the walls. I began to see that my life was a mosaic of past pain and newfound promise. I was no longer defined by the shadow of Lauren's deceit. The transformation was not instantaneous. There were moments when doubt crept in, moments when I wondered if I could ever fully let go of the past. Yet, every time I looked into my children's eyes or received a word of encouragement from a friend or colleague, I was reminded that I was finally in control of my destiny. News of Lauren's spiraling setbacks reached me occasionally, a whispered story of a tarnished reputation at the country club or an estranged friend's pitying remark, but I refused to dwell on them. My focus was on forging a future where I could thrive independently, where every victory, no matter how small, was mine. In quiet moments before sleep, as I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker like distant stars, I allowed myself to reflect on the journey that had brought me here. I had faced humiliation, betrayal, and a legal battle that had stripped away the life I once knew, only to find a strength I never knew existed within me. I realized that true freedom came not from clinging to the past, but from embracing the future with open arms. And so, as each day unfolded with its own challenges and triumphs, I learned to smile more freely, to laugh without reservation, and to build a life defined not by the scars of yesterday, but by the promise of tomorrow. In the months following my fresh start, the scales of fate began to tip in ways I had never imagined. I heard whispers about Lauren's unraveling world, a series of misfortunes that seemed to follow her like shadows. The country club, once her stage for glamour and success, was now a forum for scandal. I learned that her tennis coach, the man who had been her secret accomplice, had abruptly resigned after a heated dispute with the club's management. His departure left her isolated, unable to rely on his charm to cover for her increasingly erratic behavior. Friends who once admired her now hesitated before speaking her name, and even her closest allies started to distance themselves, as if the truth had become an unbearable weight. One evening, while I was wrapping up a successful case of the firm, a former colleague pulled me aside. "Brian, I just heard that Lauren's reputation is in freefall," he said quietly. "Clients are canceling appointments, and even the club's board seems reluctant to be associated with her anymore." I nodded silently, a bittersweet mix of vindication and sorrow stirring inside me. It wasn't about gloating. It was simply the natural consequence of choices made in darkness. Every piece of evidence I had gathered, every long night spent piecing together the mosaic of her betrayal, was now a reminder that truth, though sometimes painful, was inevitable. As I strolled past the sleek glass facade of the law firm the next morning, I recalled how lost I had once felt, burdened by humiliation and betrayal. Now, with each passing day, I built a life of quiet strength and unshakable integrity. My professional success flourished as I took on higher-profile cases, and the stability of financial rewards filled a void that had once been occupied by regret. I even began mentoring young attorneys, sharing not just the technicalities of law, but the deeper lessons of resilience and self-respect. Meanwhile, Lauren's downfall was a stark contrast to the life I was rebuilding. The lavish parties and the meticulously curated social media posts that once defined her existence were replaced by a series of public mishaps and private misfortunes. Invitations to elite events dried up, and whispers of her past transgressions became the talk of the town. One crisp evening in neighborhood gathering, I overheard a conversation that confirmed what I had long suspected. "Have you heard?" a well-dressed guest murmured. "Lauren's been banned from a club. They say her behavior has been out of line for some time now." The comment, though delivered softly, resonated like a final verdict on the life she had tried so desperately to control. In a moment of reflective solitude, I found myself standing by the window of my modest apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the night. I realized that while her world crumbled, mine was steadily rising from the ruins of betrayal. I no longer needed revenge as a motivator. My life had taken on a richness and depth that vindicated every sacrifice I had endured. I murmured to myself, "I'm finally free," not in a tone of triumph over her, but as an acknowledgement of the hard-won peace I had found within myself. In that quiet moment, I understood that justice, in its own subtle and transformative way, had been served. My journey was no longer about retribution. It was about reclaiming my identity and building a future defined by hope, integrity, and the unwavering belief that truth always prevails. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.